Out here exploring in the Withlacoochee State Forest in the Croom tract. And Croom was once a small community in this area in the 1800s. In the early 1900s, it was a booming place in those times. There's logging, turpentine, mining industries, just to name a few in this area. Today, nature is reclaiming this place. Only traces from the past still remain. Nearby is the Withlacoochee River. Back in those times, it was a main route of transportation through the area. And in fact, before the town of Croom, there was once a ferry that crossed over the river. It was the only way to cross the river in those times. Eventually, they built the railroad nearby, and the town of Croom sprung up along with many other communities along the railroad line in the area. Many layers of history throughout this place. Today, I'm taking a journey into the woods, enjoying the nature, and see what we can discover along the way. Here by the Withlacoochee River. So beautiful. Peaceful place. It's once a very busy area though during the time of Croom. The town was here. Exploring along the river, really nice to roam in these places. And the water levels can get really high throughout these areas. You can see the water lines on the surrounding cypress trees there. Right now, it's dry out here, so I can explore places that normally I wouldn't be able to reach. Seeing a lot of these cypress knees here in the ground. They're part of the root system of these cypress trees. At one time there were a lot of old cypress trees along this river. Unfortunately, many of them were cut down during the logging boom in this place. It's one of the main industries here. In fact, many of these cypress logs could be floated down this river to nearby sawmills. You can see the water lines on these trees. As I'm roaming through the woods here, just imagining how these places change over the years, and even the names of the towns as well. If you look at maps, a lot of places had different names depending on the time period you're looking at. So it's interesting to see the layers of history and learn about them as well. Before many of these towns existed in these places, people settled in these areas along the river, like Native American Indians, long ago, hundreds and thousands of years ago. So it's always been a place of habitation and activity. Lots of resources here. The last remaining tribes were forced out of these places. Unfortunately, during the 1800s, the Seminole Indians, there were 3 Seminole Indian wars. And not too far from these areas, there's a lot of activity related to that history. In fact, the name Withlacoochee comes from the Native American Indian language. It means crooked river. It has many different meanings. And the name Withlacoochee actually first appeared on maps in the 1800s or so. Before that, this river also had many different names, just like these towns had different names. These rivers in Florida had different names over the years. This is once called the Amusura River. Before the town of Croom, not too far from this area on the river, was an area called Pemberton Ferry. Now, the Pemberton family moved to the area sometime in the 1860s, I believe. But there was a ferry in operation during that time. And in fact, people that lived out here in those times had farms, and the only way to travel through these areas was along the river. There was no railroads, and there wasn't a lot of roads. There was a stagecoach that crossed the river, delivered the mail to folks that lived in these places. I would imagine that many of the settlers would have traded with some of the Native American Indians that were also still living in the area at the time, and those would have been the Seminole Indians. It's interesting exploring this place. It's abandoned and nature's reclaimed many of these areas of the old town. Very peaceful area out here in the wilderness, but ironically, outside of these woods and the surrounding areas, there's a lot of development going on. And so, just like long ago when this place was booming, and today it looks much different. Even in modern times, areas are always changing and growing, especially here in Florida with so many people moving to Florida each and every day. Towns are being developed, highways being built, and many wilderness areas such as this are being destroyed. So I feel it's important to come out here, experience them while you can. I truly cherish them. You never know when they'll be gone forever. Look at this incredible cypress tree. Still standing out here. You can see where it's hollowed out. Incredible exploring inside this old cypress tree. It's been out here for quite some time. Today it's hollowed out and dry inside of here. At certain times of year, this tree fills in with water when the river rises. See these tall cypress knees around the tree here. This is very interesting. Came across this old benchmark out here. It's a survey marker. Now, this survey marker was placed here in 1935. The date is still there. Harbor Surveys, U.S. Engineer Department, Jacksonville, Florida. Incredible. Really neat seeing this old survey marker out here in the wilderness. Dates back to 1935, and it's one of the older ones I've seen. A lot of them still have the dates on them, the information as far as who put them here. It's right here by the Withlacoochee River. At one time there was a bridge that crossed over this part of the river. Trains would travel over this way to the other side. You see some of the bridge pilings that still remain there. This is really neat. You can see remains from a bridge here. It's part of the foundations and pilings on the banks of the river. Very interesting. You can see some rails that still remain here along the railroad grade. Look at all these rails. Well, here's the old railroad line, or what remains of it at least. Just imagine the trains passing by here at one time, transporting people and goods all throughout these areas. It was a vital part of the economy.